When I was in school in 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, I was taught what is called the standard model. It's a standard model of history, the standard model of human origins and evolution, the standard model of history in terms of linear progression from less sophisticated to more sophisticated. Nothing could be further from the truth.
You don't believe that at all?
It's not that I don't believe it. The evidence no longer supports it.
Okay.
I want to be really clear. The evidence, it's not just about belief. It's about being honest with ourselves. We've asked science to tell us who we are, and science is doing a really good job. And the question is, are we willing to embrace the story that science is telling us? The DNA evidence, very recent, in the last 5 years, the DNA evidence no longer supports the theory of evolution as the mechanism for human origins. Evolution is a fact. And I want to be very clear about that. As a geologist, I've seen it in the fossil record, plants, animals, insects, some primates. Something happened 200,000 years ago, and the theory breaks down when it comes to humans. And the DNA shows us that. The DNA shows us very clearly that we did not descend from Neanderthal, for example. Their genome, we can now rebuild their genome and compare theirs to ours. We can actually, sounds like Jurassic Park, the movie. Science fiction, but it's science fact. We can pull the DNA.
You can check your percentage of Neanderthal in you, right?
We can pull the DNA from the bone marrow of fossilized remains of beings that we are supposed to be descended from and compare their DNA to ours. We didn't descend from Neanderthal. It shows that we did appear on Earth about 200,000 years ago.
Where did we come from, Greg?
Well, to answer the question, why aren't we sharing this? When I asked my friend at the university, I said, why can't you share this with your students? And he said, Greg, you don't understand. He says, if I shared that, he said, it would invalidate my 40-year career as a professor. And I said, no. I said, it would do just the opposite. It would demonstrate to your young students how valid and relevant science is, because it's designed to be constantly updated, and you're doing that. It wouldn't invalidate. And he said, well, think how much money it would cost to change the textbooks. And I said,
it's not a good argument.
I said, you're living in the Stone Age. They're not using textbooks. You changed it on the server, and you've changed it everywhere. And he said, well, think of all my class notes I would have to change. And I said, well, that's your job. But that was an example for me of it's a habit. It's a habit, but it's also threatening. And this is why I think it's so important, Brian. It's more than a philosophical conversation. As we globalize, as we push ourselves together and we see the fear of what that means, cultures coming together in different ways of thinking, we also see a rise in hate. And hate is only possible because of a way of thinking. Rachel Carson was an author in the 1960s. She wrote Silent Spring. She was one of the first environmental authors about the use of the pesticide DDT back in the 1960s. And she made a statement. I read this when I was a kid, and it was so powerful. She said, we only destroy the things that we don't value. We have been taught that human life has very little value through the theory of evolution, that we are a random process, genetic mutations. The textbook says that life is a behavior pattern that chemical systems exhibit when they reach a certain level of complexity. That's the definition of life that we're giving to our young people in school today. And it is such a sterile definition. It leaves no room for the specialness and the preciousness of life. And so our young people, through the video games that are very heartless, very violent, through the media, through the television, where are we instilling into our young people how precious and special life is? And if we're going to change that, when we begin to see what the DNA is telling us, it tells us something far beyond random genetic mutations is responsible for us. And that's, I think, where the change in thinking must begin.
Okay. And do we know where we came from at this point? Or do we just know that there's some kind of strange anomaly where 200,000 years ago, new DNA is introduced that couldn't have been more from Neanderthal? We didn't necessarily come from some other mammal form.
We don't know. That's the whole. I released a book in 2017. It's entitled Human by Design. The first half of the book is the peer-reviewed science that is now revealing the facts that tell us that evolution not only is not, but it cannot be our story. And this is the whole point. science, our young people today in universities are about to dedicate their entire lives to unraveling the mystery of our origin. They're being forced to take every iota, every piece of evidence they find, and force it into a pre-existing story called evolution. Even if it doesn't fit, it's like a square peg in a round hole. If you pound hard enough, it will fit, but it's never a good fit. And there's a huge difference between forcing the evidence into a pre-existing story and allowing the evidence to lead to whatever story it tells. This book is an invitation to do the latter. We don't know what happened, but we do know that where we have been spinning our wheels for 150 years, since Charles Darwin's time. 150 years, the best minds in academia, the best universities, the most advanced technology, the greatest sums of money have been put in to trying to solve this mystery, Brian, and we have yet to come up with one shred of physical evidence that links modern humans with the forms of life that we believe, have been taught to believe, are our predecessors. And if you look at the charts, the Smithsonian Institute, for example, and you look at those very well-known evolutionary family trees, we're up here and all these other forms of life, and we're connected through these lines. If you look closely, the lines are broken lines because they are called inferred or speculative relationships. They're believed to exist, yet no evidence has been found to date. And if we were looking in the right place, I think we would have found something.